They lied to you about God, the God you were taught to fear, the distant ruler watching from the sky, the one who rewards obedience and punishes sin, is not the true God at all. That image was built by men who did not know. The only God you will ever know, the only power that has ever created your world, is your own I am, your awareness of being. When you see this, when you truly feel this, the walls of limitation fall away, and you begin to live in the freedom that was yours from the beginning. In the quiet of your heart, beneath the noise of thoughts and the noise of the world, there is a silent knowing. It is not a voice, it is not a thought, it is the simple awareness that you are. That awareness, that invisible presence that says, I am, without adding anything to it, is the living God. And tonight we will uncover what has been hidden for ages, that the God you seek is not outside, not above, not beyond, but within, as your own being. For centuries, humanity has been conditioned to believe in separation, that man is here and God is there, that the Creator and the created are two. And from this lie, all suffering was born. From this lie came fear, guilt, dependence, and endless waiting. But when you awaken to the truth that the Creator and the created are one, that the name of God is written on your own soul as I am, the world you once knew begins to dissolve, and a new one rises in its place. In these hours, we will strip away the illusion that has held you bound. You will see how every desire, every event, every joy and sorrow has been your own imagination made visible. You will learn that there is no distant power deciding your fate, that you have always been the operant power, shaping reality through your assumptions and feelings. Perhaps you have prayed for years and seen nothing. You have pleaded, waited, doubted, and wondered why your prayers went unanswered. You have searched for God in books, in temples, in rituals, and found only silence. But I tell you, God was never hiding. It was your own belief in separation that hid him from you. For God has always been saying, be still and know that I am God. And that I am is not two words in a book. It is the pulse of your own consciousness. It is the breath behind every thought, the invisible awareness behind every experience. When you say, I am, you are speaking the name of the eternal. That name is not a title, it is being itself. Before the stars burned, before the earth took shape, before you were given a name, I am. That is the root of all creation. When Moses stood before the burning bush and asked for the name of God, the answer was not a name to fear, not a title to worship, but a revelation. I am that I am. Tell them I am has sent you, and so it has always been. The divine name hidden in plain sight, living in every breath you take, every time you declare yourself to be. But through ignorance, men have turned away from that truth. They saw the power of imagination, but could not believe it belonged to them. They saw the miracles of consciousness, but called them divine exceptions. And so they built temples of stone to worship the shadow of what lived inside their own hearts. They created a God to beg from instead of awakening to the God that commands. This is why Scripture says they worshiped the creature more than the Creator, because they placed God outside, and in doing so, they made themselves servants of their own creation. But you were never made to serve. You were born to reign. The kingdom of heaven is within you, and the throne of that kingdom is your own consciousness. When you look at your life now, at every circumstance, every relationship, every moment of joy or despair, you are looking at your own assumptions objectified. Life is the mirror of what you believe yourself to be. If you have said, I am weak, life has reflected weakness. If you have said, I am unworthy, life has shown you rejection. If you have said, I am poor, life has given you lack. Not as punishment, but as reflection. For the mirror does not choose, it only reveals what stands before it. And this is the key that will change everything. You are not at the mercy of the reflection. You are the face that it mirrors. Change your assumption of self, and the world must follow. You are not a victim of circumstances. You are the cause of them. Your thoughts, your emotions, your constant declarations of I am shape every event of your life with absolute precision. This is why Jesus spoke in such simple yet absolute terms. As you believe, so shall it be done unto you. He did not say, as God wills, or as fate decides. He pointed to consciousness, to belief, to awareness, as the creative force. When you accept this, you begin to understand that prayer is not pleading, prayer is assumption. You stop asking and start declaring. You stop hoping and begin being. The world tells you that you must work, fight, strive, and struggle to change your life. But the truth is that everything already exists within you as potential. You are not moving things from outside to inside. You are revealing what already is through the doorway of awareness. When you claim I am, you are calling into form whatever follows those words. That is the creative word that never returns void. So tonight, before we go deeper into how to use this power, pause and look within. Feel the stillness beneath your thoughts. Feel the quiet awareness that hears these words. That awareness is not a person. It has no age, no face, no limit. It simply is. And that isness is God. This is the beginning of awakening. To know that God was never apart, that heaven was never elsewhere, and that the power you have sought in prayer is the very breath moving through you now. You are not a servant waiting for permission. You are the Creator discovering Himself through the dream of form. And when this truth begins to dawn in you, the chains of fear begin to fall. You stop asking, will God help me? And begin to realize, I am God in expression. You stop saying, if only I could find peace, and begin to declare, I am peace. You stop reaching for love and begin to be love. This is the first unveiling, to see that the name of God and the name you call yourself by are one and the same. Every time you say I am, you are speaking the eternal name. You are declaring being into form. And as we move deeper, you will see how every law, every miracle, every transformation begins with this one truth. I am is the only God. Most of the world still lives under the shadow of a false image of God, a being distant, separate, watching from the heavens, recording every fault and weighing every prayer. Humanity trembles before this image without realizing that it is only a projection of its own mind, a reflection of the fear it refuses to face. The true God has never been above you, judging, but within you, creating. And until this truth is seen, you remain enslaved to a power that does not exist. Think for a moment about what it means to believe in a God outside yourself. It means believing that your happiness, your safety, your destiny depend on the moods of something unreachable. It means surrendering the authority of your life to circumstance, waiting for a sign, a blessing, a moment of grace that may never come. It means living as a servant when you were born to create. This is the quiet tragedy of mankind, worshipping what it has imagined instead of realizing the imagination itself is divine. Every image of a distant deity was born from man's misunderstanding of his own power. Unable to explain the mystery of consciousness, he split himself in two, the weak creature and the mighty creator, and then spent centuries trying to bridge the gap between them. He built temples to remind himself of a heaven he had hidden within, offered sacrifices to earn a favor that could never be denied, and wrote scriptures to explain a mystery that could only be lived. And all the while, the still small voice within whispered the same words, I am. This illusion of separation is not harmless. It shapes the whole of human experience. When you see God as something outside yourself, you create distance where there is none. You place power outside and weakness within. You turn every desire into a plea and every prayer into a confession of lack. You say, I need instead of I am, and the universe answers according to your assumption. For life does not respond to words, it responds to states of being. This is why so many prayers seem unanswered. They are not unanswered because God is silent, but because the one who prays has spoken from the wrong place. To beg is to declare lack. To plead is to affirm separation. But when you speak from awareness, when you declare from the stillness, I am free, I am whole, I am loved, you are no longer asking, you are creating. The moment you stop looking to the sky and turn inward, creation begins. The great awakening begins when you dare to accept that the I am within you is the only presence that has ever existed. It is not poetic metaphor, it is literal truth. Your consciousness, the quiet, observing awareness that knows itself as existing, is the source and substance of all that appears. Every face you see, every sound you hear, every moment that unfolds is the shadow of that awareness projected outward. There is no life outside it. There is no reality apart from it. For centuries, mystics, prophets, and sages have pointed to this, each in their own language, but always to the same truth, that consciousness is God, and that man's task is not to worship it, but to awaken to it. This awakening is not an achievement, it is a remembrance. It is realizing that the thing you have called me and the thing you have called God are two names for the same awareness. When you feel the presence of this awareness, it does not speak in thunder or visions. It is simple, steady, silent. It needs no form, no image, no approval. It says only, I am. That is the eternal name, and it is written in every heart. Before the mind can label, before the senses can define, there is being. That being is divine. You may wonder why this truth feels so hidden, why it is not taught in every church or spoken in every home. The answer is simple. Power frightens those who do not understand it. To tell a man that he is the cause of his own world, that his imagination is the creative word of God, is to strip away every excuse, every system of control, every dependence upon external authority. Institutions survive on dependence, not freedom. Fear keeps the flock together. Truth sets it free. But when you begin to awaken, something irreversible happens. You start to see the world differently. You realize that the events of your life are not random, but the outpicturing of your inner assumptions. Every challenge, every victory, every delay is a mirror reflecting the state you have occupied. When you shift the state, the reflection changes. You begin to sense that life is not happening to you but through you. And this realization is the first taste of freedom. Look around you. Everything that surrounds you now was once invisible, once only a thought, a feeling, a belief. The chair you sit in, the home you live in, the people in your life, all are crystallized forms of consciousness. Even your body, with its sensations and desires, is an image within awareness, sustained by the same power that imagines stars into being. The same force that turns invisible vibration into form is the one breathing through you right now. It does not belong to saints or prophets. It belongs to you. It is you. And yet, the old voice of doubt will whisper, if this is true, why do I suffer? Why do I fear? Why do I lack? The answer lies in the law itself. What you assume to be true becomes true for you. The law does not judge, it simply reflects. You may consciously wish for abundance, but if deep within you feel unworthy, life will mirror that feeling. You may affirm health, but if you fear sickness, that fear becomes the seed the world must grow. The law is precise and it never sleeps. The moment you understand that everything begins and ends in awareness, the power returns to you. You no longer plead with a distant deity or curse a cruel fate. You become responsible, not in the sense of blame, but in the sense of creation. You realize that you are the painter, not the painting, the dreamer, not the dream. So the first step toward awakening is not to change the outer world, but to change your understanding of who you are. For as long as you think of yourself as a limited creature at the mercy of forces beyond you, you will live like one. But the instant you recognize that your awareness, the quiet, unchanging witness within, is God, you rise above the illusion. You stop fighting shadows and turn to the light that casts them. The moment you say within yourself, I and the Father are one, and mean it, not as doctrine, not as poetry, but as the only truth that matters, a new world begins to unfold. You stop waiting for permission, for miracles, for signs. You begin to live as the cause. You understand that everything you declare with feeling must return to you multiplied. And then life becomes not a battle, but a revelation, the unfolding of your own consciousness made visible. This is where true faith begins, not in believing about God, but in believing as God. To believe about God keeps you in separation. To believe as God unites you with your own power. And when you live from that awareness, you begin to understand what it means to say, I am that I am. For it is not a phrase of worship, but a declaration of identity. It is the eternal truth whispered through every heartbeat. You are the very presence you have been seeking. And yet, even after hearing that God lives within, the mind resists. It clings to the old image of a power somewhere beyond reach. It says, surely it cannot be so simple. Surely there must be more. It wants rules, rituals, something to hold, something to follow, because simplicity terrifies it. But truth is always simple. The complexity lies only in the illusions we build to avoid it. To understand the divine as your own consciousness is not to make yourself greater than others. It is to see that there are no others in truth. What you call others are expressions of the same awareness, different waves of the same ocean. Each life is a point of view of the one infinite mind, a different tone of the same song. Once this is understood, judgment begins to fade. For how can you condemn another when the one you condemn lives within the same being you call I? The mind, however, has been trained for centuries to look outward. It trusts the evidence of its senses more than the quiet of its spirit. It believes what it sees, even when what it sees is only the shadow of its own assumptions. That is why awakening feels like a breaking, a collapse of what seemed so certain. The world you thought was solid begins to soften when you realize it is only the mirror of consciousness. Every experience, joy or pain, gain or loss, is an echo of an inner state. The outer world is nothing more than your inner world objectified. What you truly believe about yourself, not what you pretend to believe, will always find expression in the theater of your life. The law is perfect and impersonal. It does not discriminate between saint and sinner, believer and skeptic. It reflects what you are conscious of being. Once you grasp this, life changes. You stop blaming and start creating. You no longer waste energy fighting appearances, because you know that appearances are effects, not causes. You begin to look within, not as an act of escape, but as the only place where real change can occur. The world is the mirror, the consciousness behind it is the sculptor. Imagine standing before a mirror and seeing an image you dislike. You could spend hours shouting at the reflection, polishing the glass, rearranging the light, but until you change the expression on your own face, nothing will change. So it is with life. You may alter circumstances temporarily through effort or manipulation, but if the inner state remains the same, the outer world must eventually return to its old form. Real transformation begins only when you alter the cause within. This understanding is not about denial. It is not pretending that pain or loss do not exist. It is recognizing that pain and loss are messengers, reflections of a forgotten assumption about yourself. They are not punishments. They are signals pointing to the state from which you are living. When you see them in that light, even suffering becomes a teacher, a guide back to awareness. To live consciously is to accept full authorship of your world. It is to stand before every event and say, this too is mine. This too I have called forth, whether knowingly or not. That statement is not self-blame, it is power. For if you have imagined something into being, then you also have the power to imagine it anew. You can choose again. This is the essence of freedom. You are not trapped by destiny. You are guided by your own assumptions. The moment you realize that consciousness is cause, you hold the key to creation in your hands. You can rewrite the story, not by forcing the world to change, but by assuming within yourself the state that you wish to see expressed without. Consider how this law operates in simple things. A man who secretly believes that he is unlucky will find that life constantly confirms his belief. Opportunities appear and vanish. Friends withdraw, plans collapse. To him, the world seems hostile. Another man living in the same city, surrounded by the same people, moves through life with ease. Fortune seems to follow him wherever he goes. The difference is not in the world, but in the invisible state each has accepted as true. When you look at life through the eyes of lack, the world mirrors scarcity. When you live in the consciousness of abundance, abundance comes naturally. When you assume love, the people around you cannot help but reflect it back. But the law does not respond to words, it responds to feeling. You may say, "I am prosperous" 1,000 times, but if you feel fear or unworthiness, that feeling will override the words. So the question becomes, what are you truly feeling about yourself in the quiet moments? When there is no one to impress, no affirmation to repeat, no audience to perform for, what do you believe you are? That belief, that hidden self-image, is the architect of your reality. To change your life, you must dare to assume a new identity, not in fantasy, but in inner conviction. You must step into the feeling of already being what you desire to be. This is not arrogance, it is alignment. You are not pretending to be something you are not. You are remembering what you have always been. The world will resist at first because it must mirror your old assumptions until the new state becomes natural. But persist, and the mirror must change. This is the work of awakening. It is not about begging the heavens or chasing signs. It is about becoming aware of the silent creative process always unfolding within you. Each thought, each emotion, each inner dialogue is a seed planted in the soil of the subconscious, and that soil is infinitely fertile. It will grow whatever you sow, regardless of your intention. To plant fear is to harvest fear. To plant faith is to harvest freedom. So choose carefully, choose consciously. When doubt arises, and it will, do not fight it. Recognize it as the echo of an old state that is fading away. Return again to the awareness of being. Say quietly within yourself, "I am." Not "I will be," not "I hope to be," but "I am." That is the divine name, the creative word that moves mountains, because it does not describe, it declares. In time, you will come to see that creation is not an event. It is a state of consciousness continuously expressing itself. Every moment of your life is the fruit of what you have assumed yourself to be. Change that assumption, and the whole field of experience rearranges itself to match it. This is not theory, it is law. And so, the first act of mastery is not to control the outer world, but to govern the inner. To watch the thoughts that rise and fall, to listen to the quiet dialogue that shapes your feeling of self. For that feeling is the mold from which your world is poured. As you awaken to this, life becomes less about struggle and more about remembrance. You begin to live from the center rather than the surface. And that is the beginning of true creation, the realization that nothing outside can add to you or take from you. The wealth you seek, the love you desire, the peace you long for, they are all expressions of the same awareness that now listens to these words. You have never lacked anything. You have only misidentified the source. When you understand this, you stop waiting for God to act and begin to recognize that God is acting as you. Every breath, every thought, every "I am" is the movement of that one life expressing itself through form. And in that realization, the search ends. You no longer chase shadows across the surface of the world. You turn inward to the stillness from which they rise. Here, creation becomes effortless. Here, peace is not earned, it is remembered. And here begins the great journey of assumption, where every word, "I am," is no longer a habit of speech, but an act of divine creation. There comes a moment, quiet but undeniable, when a man realizes that everything he has been fighting against was never outside him. It is a strange awakening. The world, once so vast and indifferent, begins to fold inward, as if it had only ever been a reflection, a projection of his inner weather cast upon the screen of time. At first, the mind resists this idea because it challenges its oldest habit, to blame, to defend, to accuse, to explain. But sooner or later, the truth begins to whisper with such consistency that it can no longer be ignored. Nothing happens to you. Everything happens through you. This realization is not easy because it demands the death of an old identity, the self that lives by reaction, the self that must always have an enemy or a reason. We are so used to believing that our lives are shaped by forces beyond our control, by governments, by fate, by luck, by other people's choices. To believe otherwise feels almost naive. Yet the moment you test this law for yourself, when you see how your inner state rearranges the outer world, the illusion of powerlessness begins to crumble. Circumstances, though loud and convincing, are not creative. They are obedient. They take their shape from the consciousness that beholds them. Change the beholder, and the entire landscape changes. A man who feels abandoned will meet rejection in every face. One who knows he is loved will draw affection from the most unlikely hearts. The outer world bends itself to the inner conviction, for it is the shadow of consciousness, and a shadow cannot defy its source. But to understand this is not merely to repeat it, it is to live it. It is to stop the reflex of complaint, to stop treating life as something that happens to you, and to begin to claim your place as the cause. This is where power begins, though it often feels like loss at first, for to take full responsibility for your world is to lose the luxury of blame. There is no one left to accuse. There is only you, your thoughts, your emotions, your assumptions, quietly writing the script you then call destiny. This law is merciful because it is exact. It does not punish, it reflects. The mirror is innocent. If it shows you sorrow, it is only because you stand before it with sorrow in your heart. If it shows you lack, it is because you have called yourself poor. It has no will of its own. The world is a faithful echo, not a master. The tragedy is that most people fight the echo. They scold the mirror for the expression they refuse to change. You can see this pattern everywhere. The one who believes he is powerless continually attracts situations that prove him right. The one who feels unwanted notices only the slights, the absences, the indifference. Meanwhile, another person standing in the same room, breathing the same air, will find kindness and opportunity everywhere he turns. The difference is not in the world, but in the unseen conversation each carries within. Every moment you are speaking inwardly, to yourself, to life, to God. And that inner dialogue, though silent to others, shapes the tone of your reality. When you say to yourself, "Nothing ever works out for me," you are giving a command that the subconscious must obey. When you sigh, "I am always waiting," life will ensure that you remain in waiting. These are not mere thoughts, they are seeds. And the soil of the subconscious does not care whether the seed is good or bad, it only knows how to grow. But once you know this, once you feel it as law, the balance of power shifts forever. You stop pleading with circumstance and begin to mold it. You stop repeating what is and start declaring what shall be. You understand that the first and greatest work of creation is assumption, the quiet act of feeling something as true before it can be seen. It begins with a single decision, to see yourself differently. Everything else follows from that. If you dare to assume that you are not the victim but the creator, then your world must align with that assumption. And it will, though not always in the way the mind expects. Sometimes old structures collapse first, old patterns dissolve, certain doors close so others may open. This is the bridge of change, the rearrangement of events necessary for the new state to emerge. And this is where most lose faith. They see a door closing and call it loss. They watch a plan crumble and call it failure. But life, in its precision, knows better than our limited logic. It dismantles what cannot serve the new assumption so that the new form may rise unhindered. To doubt in that moment is to cling to the old reflection, to declare that the shadow is more real than the light that casts it. Understand this, there is no punishment, only correction. When the world seems to contradict your desire, it is not rejecting you. It is revealing what must be released. The delay, the obstacle, the silence, all serve one purpose, to show you where your faith still wavers, where the old self still hides. Once you see that, you no longer take resistance personally. You recognize it as the dying breath of the state you have outgrown. This is the quiet mastery of those who live by consciousness. They do not chase results, they nurture states. They do not argue with appearances, they rest in awareness. To them, the unseen is more real than the seen, because they have learned that the seen is nothing but the unseen fulfilled. And so when challenges arise, they no longer say, "Why is this happening to me?" They ask instead, From what state of being have I called this forth? That question dissolves fear, for it places power back where it belongs. Every storm becomes a mirror, every conflict a clue, every delay an invitation to rise higher. This is not philosophy, it is a living practice. To see yourself as the operant power is to enter into partnership with the universe itself. It is to live as consciousness creating, rather than matter reacting. And the more you live from this understanding, the gentler life becomes. Not because problems vanish, but because you no longer meet them as a victim. You meet them as the Creator adjusting His work. Try it. The next time you find yourself in turmoil, do not rush to fix the outer picture. Close your eyes and ask quietly, what am I assuming right now? What am I saying I am to? You will hear the answer in your own emotion. Change that feeling and the scene will begin to shift. Perhaps not instantly, perhaps not dramatically, but inevitably. For every outer event is a delayed echo of an inner state. And though the echo may linger, it cannot outlast the new sound. If you hold your new assumption long enough, the old reality must fade, and a new one will rise to take its place. When you truly live this way, the boundaries between prayer, thought, and action dissolve. Every feeling becomes a prayer, every assumption an act of creation. You no longer wait for miracles, you live them moment by moment in the quiet certainty that life has never been happening to you but through you, and always according to your state of being. That is the secret the world has forgotten. That is the truth hidden behind every scripture, every miracle, every answered prayer. The kingdom of heaven was never a distant realm. It was the consciousness that creates worlds, waiting for you to remember who you are. There is a death that must come before any true life begins. It is not the death of the body, nor the loss of possessions, but the death of the false self, the one built from fear, memory, and repetition. It is this self that clings to the familiar, even when the familiar brings pain. It hides behind excuses, defending its limitations as though they were treasures. It prays for freedom while secretly fearing what freedom demands. Yet every man who has awakened, every woman who has tasted power, has walked through this inner death. There is no other way. To die to the old self is to surrender the story that has defined you. It means releasing the phrases that have quietly shaped your world. I am unlucky. I am broken. I am too late. I am not enough. These sentences are spells, spoken so often that they become invisible. You repeat them without knowing that you are building your own prison with each breath. The walls of that prison are made of identity, the false certainty of who you think you are. The old self whispers, this is just how life is. It remembers the past like a prophecy and refuses to imagine anything beyond it. It finds comfort in repetition because repetition feels safe. But comfort is not freedom. Freedom begins when you dare to imagine a life that contradicts everything you have believed about yourself. It begins when you are willing to let the familiar die. This death is not gentle. The mind resists it because the mind loves stability even when that stability is pain. You will feel the pull to return to the old ways, to the known fears, the predictable disappointments. The mind will whisper, don't change, you'll only be disappointed again. But that voice is not truth. It is memory pretending to be identity. The ancient scriptures speak of this death in symbols. The crucifixion, the seed buried in the earth, the caterpillar surrendering to the cocoon. Each image tells the same story. Transformation requires surrender. The seed cannot become the tree while clinging to its form. The caterpillar cannot fly while refusing to dissolve. And you cannot awaken while protecting the self that was built in ignorance. To crucify the old self is to deny it authority. It means refusing to speak its language, refusing to feed its fear. When the old self says, I am weak, you answer, I am strong. When it insists, this is impossible, you respond, it is done. At first, these words feel false, like an act of defiance against reason. But in truth, they are acts of resurrection, declarations of a new identity rising from the tomb of the old. You may feel as though you are pretending. You may feel the conflict between what you declare and what the senses show. Yet this is the necessary tension of rebirth. You are learning to live from imagination rather than from history. You are learning to believe in what is unseen until it becomes seen. This is not delusion, it is creation. Every invention, every discovery, every act of genius was once a vision, held in defiance of evidence. Think of the man who dreams of success while surrounded by failure, or the woman who imagines love while living in loneliness. To the world, their hope seems foolish, but hope is not weakness, it is the seed of transformation. To persist in the feeling of the wish fulfilled, even when every sense denies it, is to align with the creative power of the universe itself. This is the deeper meaning of the cross. It is not a symbol of suffering, but of surrender, the surrender of the limited self to the infinite one. The cross represents the point where the vertical meets the horizontal, where heaven and earth, spirit and matter become one. It is the intersection of what you have believed and what you are becoming. To take up your cross is to accept this process consciously, to face the friction between old belief and new assumption without turning away. And yet beyond every death lies resurrection. The moment you let the old self fall silent, even for an instant, something extraordinary begins to move within you. You feel a new life stirring, a calm certainty, a quiet knowing that does not come from the mind. This new self does not struggle or beg. It does not ask for permission to exist. It simply is. It carries within it a strength that needs no defense, a peace that asks for nothing. It is the same presence that spoke the words, "I am that I am." The resurrection is not an event waiting in time. It is a state waiting in consciousness. It begins the moment you identify with the new idea of yourself more than the old. It happens in the stillness when you dare to say, "I am that." The instant that thought feels true, the stone rolls away and a new world begins to form around you. But the world takes time to catch up with your transformation. Just as the seed must rest in darkness before sprouting, your new assumption must take root in silence. Do not rush the process. The law works in secret, shaping the unseen before the seen. Your task is not to dig up the seed in impatience, but to water it with faith. This faith is not blind belief, it is awareness of law. You know that consciousness creates, and therefore you trust that what you have declared in feeling must appear. You may not see it yet, but it is already moving beneath the surface, gathering the form it needs to be recognized. So when the old fears return, and they will, do not panic. Do not run back to the grave of the past. Stand firm in the identity you have chosen. Speak the words of resurrection again. I am that I am. Every time you do, you strengthen the new pattern, the new vibration, until it becomes the natural rhythm of your being. The greatest misunderstanding about this inner death is that something of value is being lost. But nothing real can ever be destroyed. Only the illusion dies, the illusion of separation, of lack, of weakness. What remains is the truth that has always been present, waiting to be recognized. You are not becoming divine, you are remembering divinity. When the caterpillar dissolves in the cocoon, it is not learning to become a butterfly. It always contained the pattern within it. So it is with you. The process may feel like destruction, but it is transformation. What you call loss is the shedding of a false identity. What you call death is the unveiling of life. And when you finally rise, not someday, not in another world, but here, now, in the awareness of being, you will see that every sorrow was a step toward this moment. You will see that every ending was an invitation to begin again, every failure a doorway to power. This is the mystery that the world has turned into religion, the resurrection of consciousness. It is not confined to a single man or a single story. It is the destiny of every soul. You are the seed that must fall into the ground of forgetfulness in order to rise as remembrance. You are the crucified imagination that awakens as the creator. So let the old self die. Let it go without ceremony. Do not mourn it. It was only a mask. What comes after is not a new mask, but the unveiling of the face beneath them all. The I am, that cannot die, cannot decay, cannot fail. It is this awareness, eternal and unchanging, that will one day look upon the world you have created and whisper with quiet joy, "Behold, I make all things new." When the old self finally falls silent, when the story of who you were begins to dissolve, you arrive at a strange and powerful stillness. It is a moment both terrifying and sacred. You no longer know exactly who you are, yet for the first time you begin to feel alive. The noise of the past fades, and something vast and quiet takes its place. Awareness without shape, consciousness without definition. From this silence, creation begins anew. This is the birthplace of the law of assumption. The law of assumption is not a trick or a technique. It is the fundamental rhythm by which the universe unfolds. Everything that appears in your life, every object, circumstance, and person arises from one source, the assumption you hold about yourself and the world. An assumption is not merely a thought. It is the quiet conviction that something is true. It is the lens through which you experience existence. Change the lens, and the world rearranges to match it. We have been taught to believe that the world is solid, that it moves according to chance, or the will of others, or the cold mechanics of matter. But in truth, the outer world is as fluid as water, taking the exact shape of your inner state. When you live in the assumption of lack, even abundance slips through your fingers. When you dwell in the assumption of freedom, every barrier becomes a bridge. The law is impartial. It does not ask what you deserve, it only reflects what you believe. To assume is to create. There is no waiting, no pleading, no negotiation. The moment you feel a thing as true, creation begins. The universe does not respond to words, but to the feeling behind them, to the inner knowing that says, "This is already mine." That knowing is faith, and faith is not blind, it is vision. It sees beyond appearances, beyond time, beyond doubt. Most people live in the state of "I will be." They pray for what they hope will come. They speak of their desires as something distant. I will one day be wealthy. I will one day be healed. I will one day find love. But to say I will is to confess I am not. The law can only return what is already assumed as real. The future never arrives, because the future is always postponed by the very belief that it lies ahead. To live by the law of assumption is to reverse this habit. It is to step into the end, to think and feel from the state of the wish fulfilled rather than toward it. You do not imagine success as something you hope for. You imagine yourself successful now. You do not reach for love as something missing. You feel loved, whole, desired in this very breath. The mind may protest, but the subconscious obeys the feeling, not the argument. This is why assumption feels like magic to those who test it. The moment you inhabit a new state sincerely, the world begins to bend. Circumstances rearrange, people respond differently, doors open where there were only walls. It is not coincidence. It is the law responding to the vibration of your new identity. Think of the actor who steps on stage. For a few hours, he becomes the character completely. He walks, speaks, and feels as that character, and the audience responds as if it were real. Now imagine doing this not for a performance, but for your life. To assume the wish fulfilled is to take the role of your desired self until it feels natural. You do not pretend, you become. And once the state feels natural, the play of life must adjust to the new script. This is not self-deception, it is self-definition. You are not lying to yourself when you assume greatness in the midst of struggle. You are reclaiming authorship. You are saying, "I am no longer bound by what has been. I am bound only by what I accept as true now." The world may take time to reflect the change, but the change itself happens instantly, within you. Many fail because they try to change results instead of states. They chase outcomes, but outcomes are echoes. You do not polish the reflection in the mirror, you adjust your stance before it. The wise do not waste time wrestling with conditions. They withdraw attention from the unwanted and give life only to what they desire. This is why the practice of imagination is sacred. It is the workshop of creation, the inner stage where new realities are rehearsed into being. You enter that quiet space between waking and sleep, that threshold where thought becomes feeling, and there you live the scene that implies your wish fulfilled. You feel it real, not as fantasy, but as fact. You smell the air, you hear the sounds, you taste the satisfaction of completion. In that moment, the subconscious accepts it as truth, and the world begins to obey. This is what ancient mystics called prayer, not words spoken to a distant deity, but a movement of consciousness within. True prayer is not asking but assuming. When Jesus said, "Believe that you have received it, and it shall be yours," he was not giving poetry, but physics of spirit. To believe you have already received is to live in the end, and to live in the end is to compel the means. Every miracle follows this pattern. The blind see, the sick rise, the storm calms. Not because reality has been persuaded, but because consciousness has shifted. The healer assumes the state of wholeness so completely that matter must reflect it. Faith, then, is not effort. It is acceptance. It is the quiet certainty that what you are aware of being must express itself. For awareness is the only cause. To master this law, you must learn the art of persistence. You must hold the feeling of the wish fulfilled even when the senses deny it. This is where many falter. They plant the seed of assumption, but dig it up in impatience. They declare abundance in the morning and doubt by evening. But faith does not waver. It knows the seed will sprout unseen until it breaks the surface. When appearances contradict your desire, that is not failure, it is transition. The world is reshaping itself. The old reflections are fading while the new image takes form. Hold your inner state and the outer must follow. The law has no choice. You are not required to know how the change will occur. The mind always wants to interfere, to calculate, to control. But the path of manifestation is not drawn by logic, it is built by life itself. Once you assume the end, the bridge of incidents, a chain of events, conversations, and impulses, will appear to carry you to its fulfillment. The bridge may twist in unexpected directions, but every step will prove necessary. So let the how be. Your work is the state, not the path. Feel it as real and release it. The unseen intelligence that governs all form will do the rest. It knows ways your reasoning cannot. This is the essence of the law of assumption, to live not in reaction to the world but as the cause of it. To stand each morning and claim, "I am the author of this day." To walk through every challenge with the quiet, knowing that what you assume within must one day appear without. There is no greater freedom. You are not the servant of fate, nor the victim of circumstance. You are the imaginer of worlds. The I am within you is the creative word that was in the beginning, and it has never lost its power. Every assumption you hold is a seed of creation. Plant wisely, water it with faith, and you will see the impossible made inevitable. There is a moment, subtle yet unmistakable, when a person begins to feel the truth of the law working quietly beneath the surface of life. It arrives without fanfare, not as thunder, not as revelation, but as a still recognition. I have seen this before. You notice how the smallest assumption, once planted with feeling, ripples through your days until the outer world bends to its rhythm. The realization is unsettling at first because it dismantles every excuse you've ever held. There is no more luck, no more fate, no more them. There is only consciousness, your own. But understanding the law is one thing. Living it with mastery is another. To live it, you must learn its language, and that language is feeling. Words alone are powerless if they do not carry the pulse of emotion. The subconscious, which is the womb of creation, cannot read your logic, only your vibration. It does not listen to what you say, but to how you feel when you say it. This is why so many prayers fall silent. A man kneels, his lips moving with words of faith, yet his heart beats with fear. A woman affirms wealth but feels lack in every syllable. The universe listens not to the declaration, but to the emotion behind it. It hears the true prayer, the one unspoken. And so, though they plead for abundance, they create more need. Though they ask for love, they affirm loneliness. Though they speak of healing, they cling to the identity of the sick. Feeling is the bridge between the invisible and the visible, the thought and its embodiment. It is not merely an emotion, but a state of being. The living conviction that what you desire is already yours. When you feel the wish fulfilled, even for a moment, you have entered the reality in which that wish is fact. And what is entered in consciousness must one day appear in form. For the inner world and the outer are but two sides of the same mirror. You have felt this before, even unknowingly. Recall a time you were certain something would go wrong, and it did. Or a day when you felt an inexplicable joy and everything unfolded in harmony. These are not accidents, they are proofs. Your life has always obeyed the tone of your inner state. The law was working then, just as it works now, impartial and precise. To feel deliberately is to take the helm of your own creation. It is to move from being a passenger in the stream of events to the navigator of your own current. But how does one feel what is not yet visible? How do you feel abundance when the bank account says otherwise, or love when loneliness weighs heavy? The answer is imagination. Imagination is not escape, it is creation. It is the sacred space where you can experience the reality you choose before it takes form. To feel a thing as real, you must first see it within. Close your eyes and let your inner vision do what the senses cannot. See yourself already where you wish to be. Hear the sounds of success. Smell the air of freedom. Touch the world that exists only in the invisible. And then breathe it in until it feels natural. This is not daydreaming. It is the deliberate shaping of consciousness. The outer world is but the shadow of these inner acts. When the feeling of fulfillment becomes natural, when you no longer strain to believe but rest in the quiet knowing, the law has received its command. The subconscious accepts it as reality, and life begins to move in unseen ways to make it visible. Do not mistake feeling for effort. Effort belongs to the mind. Feeling belongs to being. You do not have to force joy or pretend excitement. You need only enter the calm conviction that it is done. This calm is the true feeling. Not frenzy, not hope, but quiet certainty. When you say I am and mean it, you have already shifted the axis of your world. But feeling requires faith, and faith is often misunderstood. Faith is not belief in something outside yourself. It is loyalty to your inner reality despite appearances. It is holding the tone of your assumption when the senses scream the opposite. The world will test you. It must. For every new state you assume, the old one will resist, not because it has power, but because habit does. You will see evidence of the past self trying to return, like echoes that haven't yet faded. Do not fight them. Simply persist in the feeling of your new state. The old conditions are not punishment. They are remnants of the prior vibration, dissolving as you remain loyal to the new. In time, the echo will quiet, and only the new song will remain. This persistence is the true art of faith. It is easy to feel abundance when the money arrives, easy to feel loved when affection surrounds you. But to feel these things before they appear, that is creation. To dwell in the mood of fulfillment without any visible reason is to master the law. You no longer react, you originate. And as you persist, something miraculous happens. The line between imagination and reality blurs. The scenes you once rehearsed in silence begin to play out in life. You find yourself standing in the very places you once saw only in your mind. The same people, the same words, the same sensations arrive as if summoned, and they were. For you called them forth through the only creative act there is, feeling. You begin to realize that there is no distance between cause and effect, only recognition. The world does not become what you imagine. It reveals what you have already assumed. Every moment you live in a state of feeling, you are announcing to the universe, "This is who I am." And the universe, without hesitation, replies, "So be it." But beware of one subtle trap, oscillation. The mind loves to wander between states, hope and doubt, joy and fear, faith and reason. Each shift of feeling sends a new instruction to the subconscious, and the result is confusion, not failure, but mixed creation. One day abundance, the next lack. One day health, the next fatigue. The law does not choose sides. It reflects whichever tone you hold longest. Therefore, make your feeling consistent. Choose one reality and stay faithful to it. When doubt comes, and it will, do not argue with it. Replace it with the feeling of certainty. When fear whispers, answer it with gratitude. Gratitude is the great stabilizer, for it anchors you in fulfillment. You cannot truly feel thankful for something unless you already feel it as yours. The discipline of feeling is not rigid, it is gentle. You will falter at times, and that is human. But even your faltering can serve you if it reminds you to return home to the truth that the outer world has no power except that which you give it. And once you learn to live by feeling, life becomes an art. You begin to sculpt it moment by moment with invisible hands. You no longer chase experiences, you generate them. You no longer wait for signs, you create them. The line between the possible and the impossible fades, for you see that both are born in the same place, the unseen conviction of I am. This is the secret the ancients guarded in parable and symbol. This is the heart of creation, to feel it real, not tomorrow, not someday, but now. For now is the only moment that exists, and what you feel now is shaping the hour that follows. So before you speak another word, before you take another step, pause, just for a breath, and ask yourself, what am I feeling right now? That feeling is your prayer, your prophecy, your future in seed form. Choose it wisely, nurture it with care, and know, with the calm certainty of one who has seen the truth, that whatever you feel deeply and persistently must one day appear before you, for feeling is the secret, and consciousness never fails to create in its own image. There comes a moment when you realize that feeling is not the end of the journey, but the beginning of a deeper practice, the art of living in the end. It is one thing to imagine a desire fulfilled. It is another to live each day as though that fulfillment were already fact. The mind calls it delusion, but the soul knows it as creation. To live in the end is to move beyond hope, beyond wishing, beyond waiting. It is to dwell in the reality you have chosen until the world has no choice but to reflect it. Living in the end is not pretending. Pretending implies doubt. Pretending says, this is not true, but I wish it were. Living in the end says, this is true now, regardless of appearance. The difference is vast. One keeps you chasing. The other allows you to rest in the knowing that the work is already done. Imagine for a moment the version of yourself who already lives the life you desire. See how they move, how they speak, how they think. Notice the calm confidence that comes from knowing the desire is fulfilled. That feeling, that quiet assurance, is the key. To live in the end is to carry that tone into every action, every conversation, every breath. You are no longer seeking the outcome, you are expressing from it. When you think from the end rather than of the end, you change everything. Most people think of their desires. They picture them as distant, separate, somewhere out there. To think from the end is to inhabit it. It is to place yourself inside the scene, looking out from its fulfillment. The outer world becomes a continuation of your inner conviction. And the moment you sustain this conviction long enough to feel natural, life begins to shift to match it. This is not imagination as escape, it is imagination as command. The creative power within you does not distinguish between what is real and what is vividly felt. It takes what you assume as fact and gives it form. This is why living in the end is so potent. You are no longer fighting appearances or pushing against time. You are planting yourself in the future as though it were the present. And the present begins to reorganize itself around your new position. You might wonder, if the desire is fulfilled within, why must the outer world reflect it at all? Because the inner and outer are not separate. They are one continuum of consciousness. What you realize within must appear without, for there is no division between the imaginal and the physical. The unseen is simply the seed, and the visible is its harvest. This is why you must never concern yourself with the how. The mind will always demand a plan, a sequence, a rational path. But reason is the servant, not the master of creation. The law of consciousness does not need to know the way. The moment you fix your assumption in feeling, life itself begins to weave the bridge of events that will carry you to your end. This bridge may appear as coincidence, chance, or even chaos, but every step is perfect. Consider a man who desired freedom from debt. Instead of worrying over his bills, he began each night to imagine the joy of financial ease, the calm of opening letters without fear, the quiet satisfaction of knowing he owed nothing. He did not force the image. He simply lived there in imagination until it felt normal. Within weeks, a series of unexpected events, a promotion, a forgotten refund, a cancelled payment, converged to release him from debt entirely. The mind would have called it luck, but he knew better. It was law. The bridge of incidents never fails. But to walk it, you must resist the temptation to judge the journey. There will be moments when the path seems to move in the opposite direction of your desire. You may lose something, face rejection, or encounter sudden change. The old state is dying, and death rarely looks like progress. But if you remain faithful to the end, if you refuse to abandon the feeling of fulfillment, you will one day look back and see how every apparent setback was necessary. Each twist and turn was a step precisely placed to lead you home. Living in the end requires surrender. Not surrender in weakness, but surrender in trust. You give up the need to control and allow the unseen intelligence to work. The gardener does not dig up the seed to check its progress. He waters it, knowing growth is certain. So too must you water your assumption with gratitude and persistence, never doubting that life is rearranging itself on your behalf. And what does it feel like to live in the end? It feels like peace. It feels like the quiet joy of knowing that nothing can be taken from you because it already belongs to you in consciousness. You move through your days not in search but in expression. You meet life with calm authority because you are no longer waiting for the world to bless you. You are blessing it with your certainty. To live in the end is also to free yourself from the tyranny of time. Time is only the unfolding of states, and you can enter any state now. You do not wait for years to pass. You step into the vibration of your desired future and let time catch up. Every moment becomes an echo of your inner reality. The future you seek already exists in potential. Your assumption is the key that opens it. The world around you will respond in kind. People will begin to treat you according to your new state, often without understanding why. Opportunities will appear, not because they were newly created, but because your awareness has shifted into alignment with them. What was once invisible to the old self becomes obvious to the new one. Some call this magic, others call it faith. In truth, it is simple cause and effect. Consciousness determines experience. What you are conscious of being, you inevitably express. And yet this practice is not cold or mechanical. It is deeply intimate, because it demands that you know yourself at the deepest level. Living in the end means falling in love with your own creation, not as fantasy, but as reality in seed form. You nurture it, protect it, and give it the warmth of your belief. The world outside may doubt, but you no longer need its approval. You have touched truth, and truth does not waver. This is the essence of faith, to walk as though your desire were already realized, even when every sense denies it. It is not arrogance, it is alignment. It is the recognition that the power which created the stars also breathes through you, and it cannot fail. So tonight, when the world grows quiet, take a moment to enter the end, not as wishful thinking, but as your true dwelling place. Close your eyes and imagine what it feels like when your desire is complete. Let that feeling fill you until it replaces every trace of doubt. Then sleep in that state. Fall asleep as the person who already has what they seek, and in doing so, you make it real in the only place that matters, consciousness. Do this consistently, and the world will rise to meet you. The faces, the places, the events, All will arrange themselves to mirror your inner conviction. You will look around one day and realize that you are standing in the very scene you once rehearsed in imagination. And in that moment, you will understand that creation was never about effort or chance. It was always about knowing who you are, the imaginer, the dreamer, the one who lives not by sight, but by vision. To live in the end is to live in freedom. It is to declare silently, "It is finished," and to walk through life with the serenity of one who knows that the invisible always precedes the visible. Every breath, every step, every word becomes an echo of that truth. You are no longer striving to become, you are being. And being, you create, effortlessly, naturally, inevitably. There is a truth even more daring than living in the end, the realization that the past itself is not fixed. Most people believe that what has been cannot be changed, that the past is carved in stone, unmovable and absolute. But nothing in creation is fixed, because everything in creation is consciousness, and consciousness is forever in motion. The past you remember is not a collection of facts. It is a living pattern held together by belief. Change the belief and the pattern dissolves. This is the mystery of revision, the power to redeem not only your future, but your history. The moment you understand that consciousness is the only reality, you must accept that the past exists only as memory within that consciousness. And what is memory but an image repeated in the mind? It can be reimagined, and therefore it can be reborn. To revise is to travel back in imagination and alter the emotional charge of an event. You do not change the event itself. You change the meaning you have given it. And by doing so, you change its consequences in your present life. You see, the past is not behind you. It is within you, constantly echoing into the present through emotion, habit, and expectation. If a man believes he was betrayed, he lives each day guarded and suspicious. If a woman remembers only failure, she walks cautiously into every new beginning, expecting to fall again. The past is a living seed, still producing fruit. To revise it is to uproot that seed and plant another in its place. But how does one revise? It begins in the same sacred space where all creation begins, imagination. Go into the silence, close your eyes, and return to the scene that still holds you captive. See it clearly. The faces, the voices, the emotions. Feel the sting, the disappointment, the fear, and then, gently, begin to rewrite it. Change the words spoken, the tone of the voices, the outcome of the scene. If once you were rejected, imagine acceptance. If once you were humiliated, imagine dignity restored. If once you failed, imagine triumph. You are not lying to yourself, you are freeing yourself. For the subconscious mind does not distinguish between what was and what is felt now. The moment you feel the new version as real, it becomes the only truth your deeper self recognizes. The emotional energy that once chained you to sorrow is released, and your outer world begins to rearrange accordingly. I have seen lives transformed by this simple act. A woman once told me of a bitter quarrel that ended a lifelong friendship. Years passed in silence. She carried guilt and resentment like stones in her chest. One night, in a moment of despair, she decided to revise the memory. She imagined herself speaking words of kindness, saw her friend smiling, felt the warmth of reconciliation. She replayed that scene again and again until it felt true. Days later, without a word from her, a letter arrived, an apology, written as though the quarrel had never happened. The past had rewritten itself. This is not fantasy, it is law. The outer world must mirror the inner change, because both are the same field of consciousness. Revision heals the timeline by healing the mind. You are not correcting history, you are restoring harmony to your own being. And as within, so without. To revise effectively, you must approach the memory not as a victim, but as the creator. Do not seek to erase the past in anger or denial. Do not fight against it. Instead, transform it with love. Forgiveness is not weakness, it is the act of creation itself. When you revise a painful event, you are not pretending it never happened. You are claiming the higher truth of what it could have meant. You are choosing a different vibration, and that vibration must echo forward through time, rewriting the pattern of your life. Many resist this practice because they believe that pain is proof of reality. They say, "But it happened. I was there. I suffered." And yet they do not realize that the suffering they recall is not happening now. It is a memory kept alive by emotion. Let it go, and the event loses its power. Keep feeding it, and it will continue to shape your life. The mind loves to worship wounds. It returns to them again and again, replaying the injustice, the failure, the heartbreak. But this repetition is not healing, it is self-hypnosis. You are reaffirming the old state, and the world obediently reflects it. The moment you stop telling that story, the spell begins to break. Revision is the art of telling a new story about the same event, not as denial, but as liberation. It is spiritual alchemy, turning the lead of memory into the gold of understanding. When you revise, you are not erasing your past, you are redeeming it. You are saying to life, "Even this served me, even this I can transform." And life, ever faithful, will mirror your new conviction. You will find that as you revise, something miraculous begins to happen. The old emotions lose their weight. The faces that once haunted you soften. The names that once brought pain now evoke peace. You begin to sense that nothing in your life was ever wasted. Every experience was raw material for awakening. The people who hurt you were actors in a play you unknowingly wrote, and by rewriting the script, you release them and yourself. This is why revision is the true forgiveness. To forgive is to revise. It is to see the event not through the eyes of pain, but through the eyes of understanding. And in that act, you free everyone involved. The energy once locked in bitterness flows again as power. When you practice revision often, you will start to notice that your outer world subtly adjusts. Conversations change, relationships heal, opportunities appear where none existed. It is as though life itself has been corrected at the source because it has. You will also discover that revision is not limited to the distant past. You can revise the day you have just lived. Before sleep, review the events of your day. Wherever something displeased you, replay it in imagination as you wish it had been. Hear the words you would have preferred to hear. Feel the emotions you would have chosen to feel. Fall asleep in that revised version. By morning, you will wake lighter, freer, and the next day will reflect the new pattern you have sown. This simple nightly ritual is one of the most powerful practices in existence. It cleanses the mind of residue. It teaches the subconscious that you are master of every moment. Each revision is a declaration. I am not bound by yesterday. I am the creator of time itself. With repetition, this practice changes not only your memories, but your identity. You begin to think of yourself not as a victim of life, but as its author. You move from reaction to creation. And in that shift, the past, present, and future become one continuous act of becoming. There will come a night after many revisions when you feel something profound. Peace with everything that has ever happened. The struggles, the losses, the betrayals, they no longer sting. You see them not as mistakes, but as steps. You realize that every shadow was guiding you toward light. The bitterness turns to gratitude, and gratitude transforms the whole landscape of your life. This is the gift of revision. It redeems not only what was, but what will be. For once you understand that the past can be altered by present awareness, you realize that the future is just as malleable. Time collapses into now, and in the eternal now, you are free. So tonight, before sleep, close your eyes and choose one scene, one memory that still binds you. See it clearly and then see it anew. Rewrite it with the brush of love. Paint it in light. And when you open your eyes, walk as though the change were complete, because in truth it already is. The law has heard your command. The past is reborn, and with it you are too. There is a moment in every seeker's path when the greatest test arrives, the test of faith. It does not come in the form of fire or thunder, but in silence. It comes when the world around you denies everything you have come to know within. You have declared the wish fulfilled. You have lived in the end. You have revised the past, and yet for a while, nothing seems to move. This is the hour when appearances challenge truth, when the senses scream louder than your conviction. It is here that most turn back, believing the law has failed them. But this is not failure, it is initiation. Faith is not the absence of doubt. It is the quiet strength to look at doubt and not bow to it. It is the art of loyalty, loyalty to the unseen. Faith is not struggle, not effort, not desperate belief. It is rest. It is the unwavering confidence that what you have felt as real in imagination is already accomplished in the unseen and must one day unfold in time. To hold that certainty while the outer world offers no proof, that is the purest act of creation. Think of the farmer who plants his seed in the soil. He does not stand by the field demanding to see growth by morning. He knows that the unseen processes are working beneath the surface. He trusts the law of nature. He waters the soil, protects it, and goes about his day in peace. So it must be with you. Your imagination is the soil, your assumption is the seed, and faith is the quiet knowing that the harvest will come. Faith is tested when nothing seems to happen, but that nothing is the sign that everything is being rearranged. The unseen is not idle. It is aligning circumstances, people, and events in ways your rational mind cannot yet perceive. If you could see the invisible orchestration at work, you would never doubt again. But you cannot see it, and so you must trust it. That trust is the bridge between imagination and manifestation. When fear whispers, "It is not working," faith answers, "It is already done." When the world says, "Look at the facts," faith says, "Facts are the shadows of belief, and I have chosen a new belief." Faith does not deny reality, it redefines it. It recognizes that what you see with your eyes is only the echo of what was once assumed. To change the echo, you must remain loyal to the new song long enough for it to replace the old. The battle is never against the world, but against the inner voice that wavers. That is why faith is described as a shield. It guards the seed of assumption from the storms of doubt. Every time you choose trust over fear, you water the new state. Every time you hold your peace when appearances tempt you to react, you strengthen the roots of your creation. You see, doubt is not an enemy. It is a shadow that appears whenever you stand in light. It exists only to reveal where your conviction is still fragile. Without it, you would never learn to stand firm. Each time doubt rises, it offers you the chance to choose again. You can surrender to appearances or reaffirm your faith. Choose faith often enough, and doubt loses its voice entirely. But how do you keep faith alive when the evidence screams the opposite? The answer lies in your inner conversations. Faith is not merely belief, it is sustained by the words you speak to yourself in the silence of your mind. Your inner dialogue is the heartbeat of your reality. If it beats with fear, fear grows. If it beats with assurance, assurance blossoms. Most people affirm their desires for a few moments, then spend the rest of the day contradicting them. They declare abundance in the morning and complain of lack by afternoon. They visualize health, but speak endlessly of symptoms. They imagine love, but dwell on loneliness. And then they wonder why nothing changes. But the subconscious listens not to moments of inspiration. It listens to the constant murmur of your inner speech. Faith means mastering that murmur. It means training the inner voice to speak from the end rather than toward it. When your mind begins to wander into fear, gently redirect it. Replace every anxious thought with its fulfilled counterpart. "I don't know how" becomes "it is already unfolding." "What if it fails" becomes "it is already done." This is not denial, it is discipline. You are teaching the mind to serve imagination, not circumstance. There will be days when the old conversation returns, when the past echoes through your thoughts and the new story feels fragile. Do not despair. That is simply the old vibration releasing its hold. The fact that you notice it means it is losing power. Every time you choose the new dialogue, you weaken the old pattern until it fades completely. Faith is not an emotion you must maintain with intensity. It is not the frantic demand that something happen now. True faith is quiet. It has the sound of still water. It walks through storms without haste. It does not argue with appearances because it knows appearances are temporary. When you hold that stillness within, even chaos cannot touch you. The moment you stop reacting, the outer world begins to reorganize itself. There is a reason Scripture speaks of faith as a mustard seed, not because of its size, but because of its certainty. The mustard seed contains within it the full blueprint of the tree it will become. It never questions its destiny. It never wonders if it will grow. It simply rests in the law, and the law fulfills itself. So too must you rest in your assumption, knowing that the same intelligence that governs the seed governs your imagination. Faith does not mean you will never feel fear. It means you will not obey it. You will acknowledge its presence, then look beyond it. You will remind yourself that fear is memory and faith is creation. You will remember that consciousness is the only power and that the world must follow the command you give it in silence. There will come a day when you realize that faith has become effortless. You will wake with peace instead of worry. You will move through life as if the unseen were visible, because for you it will be. You will see every delay as a step, every challenge as confirmation that the old world is dissolving to make way for the new. And when the manifestation arrives, as it always does, you will smile, not in surprise, but in recognition. You will say, of course, it could not have been otherwise. Faith transforms the waiting into knowing. It turns time into an ally. It is not about speed, it is about certainty. You do not need to make anything happen. You need only remain loyal to the end you have already chosen. So when appearances tempt you to despair, when the world feels silent and still, remember this: that silence is not emptiness, it is gestation. The seed is growing beneath the surface. The unseen is doing its perfect work. Be still, be faithful. Let the law prove itself in its own time. Because in the end, faith is not a struggle to believe. It is the realization that you are believing all the time. Every thought, every feeling, every assumption is faith in something. The question is never whether you have faith, but where you place it. Place it in fear, and fear grows. Place it in the promise, and the promise fulfills itself. So choose today whom you will serve, the seen or the unseen, the echo or the voice, the past or the imagination. Choose faith, not because it is easy, but because it is inevitable. For faith is the law in motion, the unseen bridge between thought and fact, and those who walk upon it will find that the invisible always becomes visible in perfect time.